Hey guys, Captain Mike, Native Son Guide Service. Hope you guys are doing well today. I'm here to talk real quick about hard baits. And when I mean hard baits, we're going to be catching trout and reds on hard baits. If you guys know me, you know I'm a real big proponent of soft plastic, but I have to tell you, it is hard to beat that topwater bite, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. First of all, I want to separate the two, trout and reds. I'm not going to go in which season for which, what time for what, but I am going to kind of give you a scenario where I think we can kind of cover both things at one time. Let's say we're going in a big old marsh creek right here, and let's say that our current's going this way. We all know that when that current turns that corner, I'm going to have a slack water seam right here. Okay? We also know that in that slack water seam, I'm probably going to have an oyster or so. You know, those oysters really in this situation, sometimes they got to have current flow to stay alive, but sometimes it can be too much and it constantly washes sand over them and they don't grow as well. So usually your oyster bars are kind of off to the side. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm in a main creek, pick any creek. I'm just using this for illustration purposes, and we're going to fish this for trout and drum. Now, chances are in this corner here, we do know that as that tide comes and hits this spot over here, coming in from the mouth, there should be a fairly decent little hole right here. And when I say hole, I'm talking about, you know, 2 to 3 foot different than the surrounding creek. Obviously, you know, here on the slack side where I don't have the current going against the creek, I'm probably gonna have, you know, like I said, I've got my little oysters and everything else. I don't have as much current, and I don't have that current digging out a hole. So just remember, when you're looking for those holes, try to pay attention where you've got the most current flow. That's the best thing to do. So we're going through hard baits for these, and where do I start and what do I do? Well, the first thing I'm going to start with is topwater, just because it's so much fun. There is nothing more fun to me than coming in a scenario like this and throwing topwater. I like topwater. Topwater is fun, it's easy, and more importantly than anything, I can cover ground. So let's say we're in the middle of the summer and we're looking for a redfish. Well, when I come in this creek, I'm going to look at this stuff right here, all these oysters and stuff on the bank. I may not throw right on top of the oysters. You know, I'm trying to entice those fish to come off the oysters and hit. So I'm going to probably throw, you know, 2-3 foot to the side, not far. I want it close enough to those oysters that if I've got fish milling around this bank right here, they're going to want to come out and investigate. I'm also not going to just leave everything around. I'm going to cover everything. The thing about topwater is you may throw that topwater here in the middle and you may have a fish come out of that hole and chase it. So always, 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 when you're throwing topwater, cover water. It's the best thing to cover water with. So let's talk about topwater. The first thing I wanted to talk about real quick is what I call my unusual topwater baits. And here's one of them right now. This is the mirror prop, and it's by Mirror, and it's got a prop here on the back, and it's got a prop there on the front. The prop here on the back's not spinning because I've got my hooks. And you don't necessarily walk the dog like you would a traditional skitter walk or a top pup junior or she dog. But there are times when this thing can be deadly, because what I can do is I can sit right here and pop it and pop it and pop it and work it across that hole. And I don't have to work it as fast as I would, for instance, one of the bigger, you know, top dogs. It's a different bait. If you haven't tried one, try these. I really like them a lot and use them a lot for you dads out there, for your kids that can't seem to work a topwater as good as you are, but you want them to throw topwater. This is a great bait for that junior angler. All they have to do is twitch the rod. It makes noise, it makes racket. It is a great bait for that junior angler. That, and one of the baits that I did bring with me is a Papa mullet, which is very similar to this, except it's got a head with a hollow cup on it, and you can just pop, 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 pop. Another great bait for that junior angler if you want to use those. Okay, the other baits we're going to talk about is, let me back up, right here. Wind condition pays, I won't say a significant portion, but a good portion of what kind of topwater bait I'm going to throw in a scenario right here. One of the things you need to think about is this. You need to make enough noise to attract those fish. That's what topwater does. But you don't want to make so much noise that it's absolutely unnatural. One of the ways you do that is the size and the type of your bait. And what I've got here is I have a she-dog, and I don't know if you can hear that over the microphone, but it has a higher pitch. It's a more buoyant bait. I have a top dog. It doesn't make as much noise. It's a lower frequency. And then I have a top pup junior, and it makes even less noise. On a slick, calm summer day, when we're going in here looking for redfish, I'm going to start with something like a top pup. I want something to make enough noise and make enough splash to make some attraction, but I don't think I need something that's loud and boisterous and everything, because I'm trying to be a little stealthy if I can. So in those scenarios, light wind, light current, I'm going to start with the smaller bait, and that is going to be like a top pup junior. They make a she-dog junior. I'm going to go with those smaller baits first. And then after those, then if the wind's picking up, the wind gets heavier, I may start and just go to like the top dog and not go right to the she-dog. I like a top dog because it's heavier. You know, the top dog is 3/4 of an ounce versus the she-dog is like a 1/2 ounce. So I want something that's heavier, throws easier into the wind, but I'm gonna start maybe with one of those before I go to that higher frequency. That higher frequency, this is what I'm gonna use when the wind's blowing and I need it to make racket. Then this is where I'm gonna use my she-dog. I want my she-dog to make racket through here. The other thing we're gonna talk about is you know, in this scenario here, I pulled in this creek, I'm gonna fish the oyster bars, I'm gonna fish the deep holes. What other kind of hard plastics am I gonna use? I don't use that many what I would consider traditional trout hard plastics for drum. I do on occasion, and when I do, a couple of them that I really like, kind of a new one this year, is MirrOlure came out with this broken back. And that wiggles back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And really and truly, you can straight crank this, and as you crank it through the water, it just slowly moves back and forth and back and forth. It is a great plug for drum. Now, you don't want to, in this scenario, fish this in super shallow water. It does sink, and it sinks pretty quick. They say it goes down to 2 to 4 foot. Trout fishing with these this year, I've had to be real careful. I think they'll go a little bit deeper, especially if you don't have a lot of current. The other one I like to use is the bigger Mirrodine. Same scenario there. I'm looking for drum in here. I'm gonna throw those out. Pop, pop, let them sit. Pop, pop, let them sit. And I'm gonna work through this here, and I'm gonna work my oysters, and I'm gonna work my holes, and do normal stuff like that that you would do for trout or drum. In this case, we're talking drum. Trout-wise, I like, if I'm trout fishing, I like seams. And remember I said my current was coming through here, and it's formed a seam here, right? It hits this bank, and guess what? Right through here, I've got slack water. Trout like to expend the least amount of energy for the most amount of protein. In this scenario right here, when I'm talking trout, now I'm in the fall here. I'm not in the heat of the summer, I'm in the fall. But I'm gonna put a MirrOlure here. And the only MirrOlure that I love to put in here in this situation is I'm gonna put the good old-fashioned Mirrodine. I've got two choices here. I've got the heavy dine, the MR18, and I've got the light dine, or just the regular Mirrodine, the MR17. If my water here is not that deep, obviously I'm gonna throw the 17 first. 17 I throw probably 80% of the time. In a situation where I might want to fish this hole, I may actually come in here, anchor upright right here, and I may throw a heavy dine. I may come right here and let that heavy dine swing right here through this hole. Okay? To me, it's not so much dependent on depth as it is the speed of the current, right? The speed of the current coming in here and how fast I want to work that bait. If I'm drum fishing, I don't typically throw a mirror dyne, but I have before. If I throw a heavy dyne, I'm throwing a heavy dyne because I want to work it fast. Bang, 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 bang. You know, I'm working that lure very fast. The reason I'm using a heavy dyne is as fast as I work it, I'm still getting below the water surface. If my current's heavy, same thing. I'm trying to get below the water surface. If in this scenario here, you know, if it's light current, if it's not heavy current, if it's shallow, I'm going to throw the MR17. I'm throwing something that doesn't sink as fast because I want to stay off the bottom there. I don't want to get hung up on all the oysters, get hung up on all the grass and all that other stuff. So it's not necessarily depth as much as it is how fast I want to work that bait and what my water current is in the situation where I'm in. So we've talked about those. The only other thing I wanted to kind of mention here real quick is MirrOlure's got a lip bait. It's very similar to the good old-fashioned X-Rap by Rapala. Again, another bait that I can work in these deeper holes right here and rip through these holes. In those situations, what I want you to do is I want you to throw it out, let it swing in the hole, rip the rod twice, and I mean give it a good 3-foot pull. Bang, bang. Reel up tight to it and then stop. And what will happen with these baits is a lot of times once it goes down and you stop reeling, it will slowly rise. And it's that rising action, that coming off the bottom and real slow going back up to the surface that usually is what produces your strike. Same scenario here, but let's talk about winter. You know, I had said, hey, trout fishing, you know, I'm going to throw an MR17. I do catch reds on the MR17. But to me, what I want to do with that MR17 is I'm going to throw that out here in this scenario in the wintertime, and I'm going to work it real slow. And I want it just to sit there and swing in the current, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. One of the things I want to talk to you about is I want to talk about maybe kind of the different holding stations. How do we determine those holding stations? How do we look at the difference between a holding fish and what I call a moving fish? And let me draw another scenario for us. Where did I put the eraser? Let's say we're going in a really big bay. Let's say I've got current coming this way and I've got this really big bay. Okay? Maybe I've got some smaller feeder creeks over here. Maybe I've got some oysters right here in the middle. And let's say I'm going in this bay in the summertime. Heat of the summer, early morning, I'm going to come in this bay. Let's also say, while we got it there, why don't we say my wind and my current is going the same way? Okay? I consider two different types of fish in this scenario. I consider fish that are holding on station, and then I'll have what I call movers. It's really important to think about the holding fish and where you want to fish them. But the reason I want to bring your attention to what I call the moving fish is sometimes I'll drop the trolling motor and you'll go charge in here, and guess what? You spook fish sitting here in the mouth. Right? Because they were moving into this, or they were moving out of this, or they were moving from this creek over to this point right here. You know, think about that when you're in this situation. Okay? I'm going to throw a top water. I'm going to pull up to this creek and I'm going to hold off of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the mouth. First and foremost, I'm throwing a top water. Again, like I said earlier, heavy wind, I'm throwing a she-dog. Light wind, I'm going to throw a top pup junior. And I'm just going to hit the mouth. Right? It's in the summertime. My water temperature's, let's say, 85-ish or so. It's going to be up to 90 today, 92. I'm starting early in the morning. Maybe it's a little bit lower, you know, than 85 because I'm starting real early, right at sunrise. First thing, I'm going to work the mouth with the top water. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to work into these oyster bars, and I want to make sure that I concentrate a top water around these oyster bars. I want to look for signs of bait around these oyster bars. You know, the reason why fish like oysters so much isn't because they like oysters. It's because those little small fry, whether it be mud minnows, whether it be grass shrimp, all that stuff likes to come to that oyster bar because it gives them protection where they can hide in between those nooks and crannies. You know, we talk a lot about tailing fish and what fish do when they're tailing. One of the things they're doing is they're taking that big bulbous nose that that drum has, and they're rooting around and making some of that stuff spread up and kick up and do everything else. Trout are the same way. They're not going to root like that, but they're going to sit here on these edges and they're going to wait for something to come out of there and mess up. Whether that is coming out of the edges because the tide is falling, or maybe you've got something else and they're rooting around, a stone crab, a blue crab or something, kind of churning that water up, making that bait kind of push out of there. That is why everything likes oysters. It's not because they like oysters, it's because they want the bait and all the stuff that's in there. And they're going to set up on the outside edges of it a lot of times and ambush into it when that bait starts to move around. The other thing I want you to think about is creek mouths, little teeny creeks off big bays like this. Same thing. Water flowing in, water flowing out. If you got bait coming in, bait going out, by all means, that's a great place to set up and look. You know, I've got a saying, and this kind of really points out, I don't think I said it earlier, find the bait, find the fish. If I pull in here in the summertime, dead of summer, and I don't see any bait moving, I'm going elsewhere. Now, same scenario in the wintertime, I may stay and fish a little bit more. My bait in the wintertime is different than my bait in the summertime. In the wintertime, I may have trout in here feeding off shrimp, and I may only see a little teeny speck of shrimp jump in the distance, or they may be on grass shrimp, or they may be on little teeny crabs, you know, drum-wise. I don't necessarily have to see bait in here. I'm going to stay around a little bit further in the winter because my bait is a little less obvious. I hope that, guys, gets you guys thinking about some stuff. Hard baits, especially topwaters, always fun to do. Go out, tie a topwater on, have fun. I'll see you guys on the water. Thank you.